The Hubble Space Telescope has been offline for nearly a month when it encountered a problem on June 13th. Since then, the observatory has been sitting idle in a protective safe mode while engineers on the ground are working to diagnose the problem and come up with a fix. Hubble has suffered many technical failures in its past, and engineers have always managed to come up with clever fixes and workarounds to keep the spacecraft going. That's partly because Hubble has many redundant systems on board, but it could also be repaired by the Space Shuttle, which made 5 servicing calls to the observatory since 1993. But Hubble's last servicing mission was in 2009, and NASA retired its space shuttles just 2 years later. In April 2021, Hubble celebrated its 31st year on orbit. That's an incredible milestone, but it's also a reminder of just how old the Hubble Space Telescope is. And naturally, that has people wondering if mission engineers can fix this iconic but aging observatory. Welcome to Launchpad. I'm Christian Reddy, your friendly neighborhood astronomer. Now, as of this filming, the Hubble's mission operations team are still trying to determine the exact problem and have already tested some possible fixes. It's quite possible that by the time you watch this video, Hubble will either have been returned to service or not. At least not yet. So what happened to Hubble, and how do they know what the problem is and how they might fix it? And what if it can't be fixed from the ground? Well, today we're going to answer those questions, but first I'd like to thank Magellan TV who are sponsoring today's video. If you're a fan of Hubble, then I invite you to check out Hubble's Enduring Legacy, a documentary about the iconic telescope's history and what it has revealed about our universe over the last 3 decades. This documentary and many more like it are available on Magellan TV, which is a new streaming service founded by the filmmakers themselves. You can enjoy content on topics such as art, nature, history, and of course, space and science. And now Magellan TV is offering my viewers 30% off an annual subscription. That's a full year of Magellan for just $3.50 a month. Simply visit the link in the description to claim your discounted membership today. On June 13th, Hubble's payload computer halted operations shortly after 4 p.m. Eastern Time. This isn't the spacecraft's main computer, but rather a separate payload computer that's responsible for coordinating and controlling the science instruments. Normally, the payload computer sends a routine keep alive signal to the spacecraft's main computer. When the main computer stopped receiving the signal, it automatically suspended science operations and put the spacecraft into a safe mode. Exactly how Hubble safes itself depends on the situation. If there's a malfunction that doesn't otherwise threaten the telescope's survival, it simply stops all science operations, puts the instruments on standby, and maintains whatever pointing it was in at the time. But if the problem has to do with its power or pointing control systems, the computer then takes the additional step of commanding the solar arrays to directly face the sun to generate maximum power. Both of these safe modes are controlled by the main computer. But if the main computer were to have a problem, or if its pointing system were to fail, another subsystem called the Pointing Safe Mode Electronics Assembly, or PESA, takes command of the spacecraft. The PESA computer turns off all unnecessary equipment to conserve power and angles the solar arrays to face the sun. The system even has its own gyroscopes and pointing control system to move the telescope if necessary. The system can even close the aperture door should the telescope drift to within 35 degrees of the sun. Now, I tell you all this just to give you an idea of just how robust Hubble's safing system is. It's not going anywhere and it's not spiraling out of control or anything. I don't know the exact safe mode configuration Hubble is in right now, but its main computer, power, and pointing systems are all healthy and safe, so my guess is Hubble is probably in one of the lower tier safe modes controlled by its main computer. And that's exactly where we want it to be so the engineers can work the problem. Now, the payload computer is part of the Science Instrument Command and Data Handling Unit, or SICMDH, or as I call it, SciCDH. This unit stores and controls commands received by the science instruments, formats the science data, and sends it to the communication system for transmission to Earth. And this unit was replaced during the last servicing mission in 2009. It's installed inside the door of one of the servicing bays that sits atop the science instruments. Its payload computer consists of a NASA standard spaceflight computer with 2 central processor modules, 2 standard interface circuit boards, and 4 memory modules. The rest of the SciCDH includes a redundant pair of command unit and science data formatters, a pair of remote interface units that connect to the science instruments, and a power control unit with redundant power regulators, as well as various memory, data, and command communication lines called buses that are connected by couplers. These components are all redundant so the system can recover from any single failure. Initially, it seemed that the payload computer was unable to read to or write from memory. The mission's operation team tried restarting the computer the next day, and it ran for a little while, but it soon experienced the same memory problem. Each module has 64 kilobytes of memory. Yes, I know, 64 kilobytes. But remember, we're talking about a computer that was designed in the 1980s and has to be hardened against radiation damage. Anyway, the payload computer uses only one of the 4 memory modules at any time, so the team tried to switch to one of the 3 backup memories. But the command to initiate a backup memory module failed to complete as well. Then they tried to initiate both memory modules on the following day, but those attempts didn't work either. And this suggested that the memory issue was really a symptom of a problem elsewhere in the SciCDH. So the team began to investigate whether the payload computer's central processing module or its interfaces could be at fault. They switched on the backup computer for the first time in space. Both computers have full access to the 4 memory modules. However, it seemed that no matter which combination of computers and memory modules they tried, the same problem kept coming back over and over again. Now, the odds of both computers and all 4 memory modules having degraded together seems vanishingly small, which means that the problem is probably further up the hardware chain. Attention turned to the Command Unit Science Data Formatter, or CUSDF, and the Power Control Unit. The CUSDF is the module that routes commands to the science instruments and receives science data back, and then formats the data for transmission to the ground. The Power Control Unit houses a redundant pair of power regulators to ensure a steady voltage for the payload computer. If the voltage is too high or too low, it could cause the computer to fail. Now, the good news is that these electronics are also fully redundant, with the primary on the SciCDH's A side and the backup on the B side. But switching to the B side isn't nearly as straightforward as the switches attempted on the computer. And that's because of the way the other hardware units elsewhere on the spacecraft are physically connected to the SciCDH. If they change to the B side, then those external units would also need to be switched over to talk to the B side as well. And that makes the switch procedure a lot more complicated, and let's face it, a lot riskier as well. Anytime you make a change, there's always a risk of something going wrong, and this new procedure requires several changes to be made in a specific sequence. However, this wouldn't be the first time NASA had to perform this type of switch. Remember when I said that this SciCDH unit was replaced in 2009? Well, that's because the previous unit had to be switched to its B side after it failed in September 2008. As a matter of fact, the final servicing mission was supposed to launch in December of that year, but it was pushed back by 6 months just so they could get the spare SciCDH ready. Now, whenever there's a major switch like this, the mission operations team will take their time to make sure that everything is thoroughly reviewed and tested before taking any further action on the spacecraft. That's why they spent the last week of June just reviewing and updating the procedures for the switch. They even brought a high-fidelity simulator out of mothballs and tested it out before they began testing the switch procedures. On July 8th, the mission operations team successfully completed 2 days worth of testing of the switch procedures. And that's great news. But there's also further scrutinizing of the telemetry to make sure that they know exactly where the fault is. They don't want to perform the switch if the fault really is somewhere else entirely. But if everything goes well with the reviews, they could perform the switch in the coming week. Now, it's tempting to lament the fact that there are no more space shuttles left to service Hubble. But the truth is that Hubble goes into safe mode a couple of times every year. In fact, Hubble went into safe mode as recently as March 7th of 2021 due to a software bug, and you didn't even notice. And that's because the mission operations team always takes the time they need to troubleshoot and diagnose the problem before they make a fix. Some fixes are relatively easy, while others are more complicated. That's the nature of running a space telescope. But, you might say, Hubble isn't just another space telescope, it's our space telescope. And I would absolutely agree with you. But it's not the only one that we own. The Chandra X-ray Observatory, the Gehrels Swift Observatory, and indeed every other NASA mission belongs to us, and all of these telescopes have had safing events at one point or another. In fact, they've had several, and sometimes they've lasted for up to months at a time. Plus, those telescopes were never ever serviced on orbit. However, Hubble is 31 years old, and there's no question it's showing its age. Its NICMOS instrument degraded to the point where they had to turn it off years ago. Its pointing control system has run out of spare gyroscopes, and now a critical subsystem is about to lose its primary electronics. Yes, the James Webb Space Telescope is touted as Hubble's successor, but JWST is an infrared telescope. Hubble is an optical, visible light telescope that still outperforms the largest optical telescopes on the ground. That's why astronomers still compete every year for time on Hubble. So yeah, it would be really nice if there was some way to support future servicing missions. NASA's Space Launch System and SpaceX's Starship could certainly carry the payload necessary for a full shuttle-style servicing mission, but both would require extensive modifications to actually carry that mission out. And those modifications could probably take several years on their own. I've even wondered if SpaceX's Crew Dragon could be modified to carry out a small, limited scope servicing mission instead. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that this idea is not very straightforward at all. A Crew Dragon would need a lot of modifications to support EVAs, such as suit storage, the ability to open the side door from the inside, docking with the soft capture mechanism, external handrails, a remote manipulator arm, etc. It would be great if we could send a robotic servicer that could dock with Hubble and repair it. In fact, NASA started looking into the Hubble robotic vehicle and deorbit module concept in the mid-2000s after the White House canceled Servicing Mission 4 in 2004. This all occurred following the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia the previous year. So NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center and some private companies teamed up to investigate the feasibility of servicing Hubble robotically. I don't know if a robotic servicing mission has been considered ever since, but given that there's no true replacement for the Hubble Space Telescope, it would be nice if Congress could find a little bit of money for NASA or even the private sector to revisit the idea and keep Hubble going. Meanwhile, I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters for helping to keep Launchpad Astronomy going, and I'd like to welcome my newest patrons, Jonah, Alvaro Bernal Guerrero, and Zoran Lacko. And if you'd like to join me on this journey through this incredible universe of ours, well, please make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any new videos. Until next time, stay curious, my friend.